welcome to another edition of Faith Greater Than Fear. We're in Joplin, Missouri, here at GNPI, Good News Productions International. My name's Mike, and we are looking forward to another edition where we just hear from wonderful people who love Jesus about what they're doing in ministry, what they're doing in the business sector, as students, teachers, families, leaders of companies, leaders of organizations, and so forth. And so I hope you will stay tuned for this edition because it's really going to be a good one. And the reason is because we have with us today Stephanie Freed. And Stephanie, welcome.
Hi, Mike.
And we are not that far. She's in Joplin as well and is CEO of Rapha International. And so we want to just talk a bit today and have a conversation, Stephanie, about your family and how you're doing with COVID and some maybe lessons you're learning. Secondly, is just tell us about the ministry, the fabulous ministry, I may add, that you are having the opportunity to lead. And then also just a new kind of leadership volunteer role with ICOM, International Conference on Missions, that you have been involved in both at board and soon to be president level. So those are kind of the big three pieces. So let's back up. Tell us how are you doing, your family, and what's COVID saying to you?
Well, Mike, first of all, usually, even though we live in the same city in Joplin, we don't see each other much here. We see each other all around the country at different missions events, and it always feels like when I see you, Mike, it always feels like a little bit of home. So I love that about you. Yeah. And of course, I love your wife and the heart that she has, not only for young women in crisis, life crisis during pregnancy and different crisis situations, but also for her heart for combating trafficking. We share a big heart in that. And so I just love your family. What's COVID saying to me? Let's see. I was actually in Thailand in February and the beginning of March, kind of when this was all just starting. And American Airlines kept changing my flight home and rerouting me a different way. That happened 4 times. And finally, my husband said, Stephanie, you need to come home. So I flew home through Singapore, and that was the last time I've been out of the country this year, Mike, which is, as you know, for us and for me, that is very strange. So it's been a different season, but I always look for the blessing in each season, no matter how difficult. And I will say that being home with my family, kind of forced in the house together this spring and summer, especially as I have children who are now teenagers and early 20-year-olds, forcing us all to be together in the house was such a blessing. Spent lots of time in the backyard, lots of gardening and planting and pulling weeds, and the symbology of pulling those weeds was really, it was an encouragement for me, to tell you the truth. And so I spent a lot of time just in the dirt, in the ground, pulling weeds, planting, and praying about this next season. So looking for the good in COVID, I would say that was just a real blessing to be on the home front with my family. Yeah.
Well, we have had several, and I was actually taking a walk. We have a little wooded area, you know of it, up here at GNPI's campus. And I was meeting another brother yesterday, and he was just saying again how just had to get out of the office and walk through God's creation. And it's amazing, isn't it? Zoom is great. Technology, we embrace it here at GNPI, but it has the ability with social media to be very toxic and very wearing. And when you get on your knees and get your hands in the dirt and take the walk in the woods and look up at night at these wonderful full harvest moons and starlit skies that we've had recently in the Midwest, there's just a healing, isn't there, that God's creation does of removing some toxins from us.
So true.
So it's good. So keep enjoying the sabbatical of travel right now. I'm right there with you. And I haven't moved anywhere really much since February as well. Most silence in that regard, radio silence and travel since in 35 years for me. So it's a sabbatical of a different kind. Let's move to the journey of Rapha International and what it does and what our viewers need to hear in terms of its purpose and scope, but then also how COVID has had to force probably some pivot in your leadership's role there.
Yeah, so Rapha International was started in 2003, and our mission is that we want to end human trafficking and sexual exploitation of children, one child at a time. That's a very important part of our mission statement, one child at a time. And we do that through aftercare for child survivors, and prevention for vulnerable children, and then really just trying to engage anybody that wants to take part, to take action on how they can be involved. So in 2003, we started with our first aftercare campus, and that was in Cambodia. And our second one was in Siem Reap. The first one was in Battambang, Cambodia, secondly in Siem Reap. And that Siem Reap campus really came about because of CIY. Students from Christen Youth in 2008 saw a documentary about human trafficking, and they went back home after that summer conference, and they would not let it rest. They pushed it forward, and really, Mike, it's amazing because we can attribute most of our growth to students throughout the years, and that remains true today. High school and college age students are so passionate about this issue, and they may not have, enough money to buy coffee at Starbucks, but they have a voice, and social media has given them a platform to use their voices in a big way. So through all of that, our second aftercare campus opened in Siem Reap. Our third, we did a border crossing into northern Thailand. And then a handful of years ago, we opened our first aftercare campus in Haiti. And Haiti remains very challenging to work in, as we all know. But what a blessing those girls are, and what potential their lives hold for changing their country. So that's a little bit about Rapha International and how we got started.
So 2003, 4 campuses now, several different continents, lots of travel that when you can, love to do. But for our audience to hear what you said is massive, and that is, it's all about those who are listening, your children, your high schoolers, your college kids. They may not have the money, but they have a voice. And with the God-given tools of, you can roll your eyes of social media, but there is a good side. So let's use the social media and the technology to unite us for a common cause instead of dividing us. And that's what you're seeing happen with the young people in that regard. And that's so encouraging to hear. There are good millennial, great Gen Z folk out there. And they're the next generation, they're our future. And that's cool that you, Stephanie, give them a voice and give them a cause and give them an opportunity to do that. Before, on another program, I had this comment come up that during COVID, there is actually, obviously, they turned the spigot loose on pornography. And that also has caused impacts on trafficking. Speak to us a moment about that from your perspective.
Yeah, there's really a rise in a global rise in online sexual exploitation of humans, especially children. We actually just received a story from our Thai campus just this week of a 14-year-old who, due to COVID, her community, like the small businesses, just began to collapse. See, we have to remember that this is a global pandemic that is affecting people everywhere. And so when you're talking about the developing world, you're talking about a lot of people who were already only surviving day to day. They were just earning the money that it was taking to get them and their families through that day. There was nothing in reserve, and there's no government help coming for them. And so, yeah, just this week we got a story from a 14-year-old girl who was placed with us at our Thai campus, and that was her story. Her community began losing businesses, so all these small businesses closing down, and her parents' little restaurant had to close. Nobody could afford to come eat or together, and she began to look for other ways to help her family survive. A friend of hers said, "Hey, you can review products on this online mechanism, and you can earn money." And it was just a trick by an organized gang in her area to lure her into sexual exploitation. And once that first pornographic photo was released of her, it was all over for her. And that's really another form of bondage, where these girls are just in shame, and then they're like, what can I do so that you won't release these photos of me? And then they get trapped into, not only online exploitation, but then they're trapped into daily sex trafficking. And so this is happening globally. This is happening here in the US, and it's happening all over the world. A huge epidemic of exploitation happening to our children.
And it's getting accelerated while we are in the midst of a pandemic.
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about, and it really is not a nice thing, but trafficking is a renewable resource.
That's right.
Talk to us about either some numbers of dollars it generates, or numbers of people it involves. Do you have any sense of that you could share with our?
Well, the statistics, you can find statistics all over, and all of them are different. And why is that? Because we don't know. It's underground, it's done in the dark. And so we don't know. But we do know that there are more people trapped in slavery today than there have ever been in history. Literally millions and millions of people trapped in slavery. And so many of them are children. UNICEF says that every single year, more than 1 million children are disappearing into slavery. More than 1 million children every single year. So just even that statistic is staggering. And Mike, unfortunately, that number is growing due to exactly what you just shared, with online exploitation blowing up. That number is only growing. Yeah, and when you're selling drugs or you're selling arms, you sell those once and then they're gone. But with a human, you can sell them over and over and over and over again. And so that's what makes human trafficking so lucrative. We see this especially in organized crime now. If organized crime groups are involved in drugs, they're also going to be involved in human trafficking as well, because it's just too lucrative. And so these are things that we all need to have our eyes open to, because as parents, as aunts and uncles, as grandparents, these issues affect our children, and they affect our children more closely than we would like to think. And so it's really important, Mike, that we are educating and training our children to understand the dangers of online exploitation, that we are educating them about the grooming process, because that's what's happening with online exploitation too. People trying to act like they're friends of these children, and just luring them in until that day that they say, "Hey, let's meet in real life."
Yeah.
And so we have to be educating.
Right. And to that point of educating is where I was going. Thank you, is Stephanie, the fact that, Stephanie's talking about over there. She listed 4 countries or 4 places where they have offices and homes. No, this is in our backyard. This is in our country. This is in our suburb. And no, it's not for those in the low demographic of economic situations. This is many times where there's a latchkey kid from a dual income family that's feeling lonely, has no great paternal oversights, maternal instincts are low or something, and all of a sudden there is just this grooming that can happen online. So look what your kids are watching, my friends, and see what apps are happening. Hold them accountable. They can't drive yet. They can also be watched at on their devices. And secondly, when we're traveling, things is like truck stops, watching young girls that are looking down. And it's not just girls, it's boys as well. And so please, with our time here, give us some summaries of other things to do with that topic, and then we're going to move on to the final one with some ICOM conversation. So what would you like to tell our audience in closing about that?
I just always want to encourage people to do what I did back in 2002, whenever I was challenged by my father to research human trafficking. Do your work, please. It's all out there. All you have to do is start searching. And you can go to really good websites like Rapha.org, like IJM.org. There are so many that are full of information about what to look for, and hotline numbers that you can call if you suspect a case. And we always say, if you see something, say something. Just if there's any kind of instinct in you that this child might be in trouble or this young woman might be in trouble, make that call, because it will save their lives. Yeah, let the police sort it out, what it really is. But if it looks wrong to you, you go ahead and make that call.
And they will not see that as an inconvenience.
No.
Most law enforcement are very, very appreciative of that kind of tip, even if it's a false one, because they appreciate having eyes on by you mentioning that. And if you're local here in Missouri, there's the RISE Coalition, there's Life Choices. And if you're in the state of Missouri and other states, each look up what the local response teams are, either with law enforcement or other collaborations and coalitions. And Stephanie, thank you for what Rapha is doing there, international. Let us then go to, in the final minutes here, we got about 3 or 4, is with ICOM. Tell us what ICOM is and your role in it.
Yeah, so ICOM is the International Conference on Missions. It used to, we used to call it the Missionary Convention, but now we're calling it ICOM. And we love ICOM. The energy at ICOM is so great. It happens each year, usually the week before Thanksgiving, and it's moved around the country in different locations. But man, it is an awesome conference. Amen, Mike Sharkey.
Amen.
Yeah,
amen.
It's incredible. The students show up, the missionaries show up, the church leaders show up, and it is just, it's fun and it's high energy. And you leave there just being so overwhelmed by what God is doing all over the world. And just being so blessed to be able to hold hands with all of these incredible people doing work to bring God's kingdom to earth. Yeah, it's a.
So it'll have 8,000 to 10,000. It may sometimes be a little lower, sometimes a little higher. This year, it's going to be modified with the pandemic, of course. Kind of just a weekend gig physically in Indianapolis, and then some online virtual elements of that. So check it out at icom.org. What are your roles? I think you have 2 roles, aren't you, with ICOM?
I do sit on the board of corporate officers, and also they have invited me to be president in 2023 in Oklahoma City, which is just in our backyard. So we're really looking forward to that. We love working already with the churches in Oklahoma. They're stoked to bring ICOM to Oklahoma City in 23, and it's gonna be a fun time. Put it on your calendar.
Put it on your calendar, and know she's going to get very rich over this presidency. It's a voluntold, it's a volunteer position. I know, I've been there, I've felt it, but it'll be lots of blessings, but you're holding basically 2 full-time jobs for a while. And not that CEO of Rapha International isn't enough by itself. So Stephanie Freed, thank you for your time. What closing comments would you like to tell our audience in this season of October?
Yeah, I don't know. I would say one thing that I know I've done through COVID is I'm trying to be very intentional about experiencing joy, the joy of the Lord. And I'm intentional about every time I go out my door, I just ask the Lord to show me how I can be a blessing to others. In this time when so many are so lonely and so many are so discouraged, it's really important for us as light bearers of Jesus Christ to shine our lights even brighter. And, Mike, I miss the smiles. The mask hides those smiles. And so I just always pray, God, how can I be a blessing to somebody today? Let me be a blessing. And I would encourage everybody to really be intentional about being the light right now.
Amen. Good words from Stephanie Freed. Civility in a time of incivility goes a long way. Humility in a time of pride goes a long way. And one who's lived in Africa and seen the night skies, a little bitty candle, a lit matchstick in a very unlit, moonless night can go a long way. So good words. We, as image bearers of Christ and the torch, can do so much to bring so much hope in this dry and thirsty season of ours. Stephanie, thank you. Blessings to your family and to all of you. Thank you for dialing in on this edition of Faith Greater Than Fear. I hope your faith was encouraged and your fear was decimated and decreased. If you enjoyed this program, please share it on your social media channels. There's a podcast version of it as well. And so until next time, be blessed. And from all of us at GNPI, from Stephanie Freed at Rapha International, thank you and God's blessings to you.